What is going on, everybody? And in this video, we are giving you a state of the market and stock picks for April 27th, 2022. So that sounds like something you're interested in. Consider subscribing, as I do provide you daily and weekly updates to get you prepared for the day and week ahead. Now, going to make this video very short because a lot of it is going to matter what has happened overnight. From what we've seen the past 3 days, we've essentially done nothing but selling ever since Powell came on and started talking about are becoming very hawkish, which was anticipated. But he came out very hawkish, saying that 50-point basis move was on the table for the next meeting. Shortly after, followed by a bunch of reports coming out about 75-point basis moves on every meeting. So there was just nonstop stuff coming out on Friday, and then today we didn't have a whole heck of a lot coming in, other than the fact that a lot of the earnings, we had two big earnings. We had Microsoft and we have Google. They made expectations, but the growth is not looking good at all. And so that is what's causing a lot of these different these major companies to start selling off, is that forward guidance. And we're going to get more and more of that this week with Apple and Amazon and Facebook coming up. So being said, this is what's going to drive the market. And then you got the Fed meeting next week on Wednesday. We got Tuesday, Wednesday, but what really matters is on Wednesday at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You're going to have the report, and then you're going to have Powell come out and talk about that report and fielding questions. And that is what's really going to impact the market. But with that being said, moving forward, going into tomorrow, Google, like I said, Google did really well. We'll actually look at Google here. We'll look at Microsoft, and we'll look at Texas Instruments as well. But just as overall market sentiment, we are at a very critical level. We need to hold a 41.64. If we cannot hold this level, we're going to be in for a big world of hurt. As you can see, we are starting to wedge. So tomorrow will actually be critical because of this wedge ending here. If we did not base out overnight, we will probably gap down overnight, again, because this is a very critical support. And being said, if we do gap down, that means a lot of other continuing earnings are probably going to be extremely bad. Even if Apple does well, even if Amazon does well, which Amazon I don't think will. Apple is very questionable because of all the lockdowns in China. There was even more lockdown talks that they were really cinching down on lockdowns in China. So that could be very concerning for Apple going into earnings. Their earnings is on Thursday. So again, this level is very critical. We've been messing with this level. Again, we've already hit it once. We need to hold this level. If we don't, again, we could gap down. You're looking at that 4,100 mark tomorrow if that's the case. If that candle does open up below the 41.56 tomorrow, roughly, you're pretty much looking at 4,100. And then at that point, going into this whole year, and we've already tagged this further back here. So, I mean, we can head down all the way down to that 40.56. You're looking at some really bad levels a ways back. But this is a very critical level. As you can see here on the weekly, this is a very critical level, and we're coming pretty hard into it. Now, considering this is a lower high, and this was this might be an actual lower low. If this does break through here, we could get some massive selling, possibly even see 4K again. There's a lot of possibilities here. 4K is essentially probably your next, I mean, you have 40.57, then you essentially have that 4K mark for support. And now again, going on with the markets, the sentiment of the market is changing fast. And even though I do believe we can still be bullish towards the end of the year, there's still a lot of stuff we're having to work out. And that's why you're getting a lot of these fits where things are just, we're essentially dealing with like a penny market, a penny stock market. You get massive run-ups, massive sell-offs, chop in between, because there's just a lot going on. But once we get out of some of this stuff and get some of these, you got the war, which is something new being implemented. You still got bond buying, which is something else that's on the table, which you have to see what happens. Again, Fed threatening to take everything away. And again, lockdowns, and now we're seeing earnings in forward guidance. The growth is coming down, which is not a good thing because that leads to a recession. Also, again, why a lot of stocks have been splitting because of that fact. A lot of your big corporations, Shop and everything, Google, they've announced stock splits to help in case of inflation. And now we're starting to see why, because of the fact that growth has come way down. And nobody wants to see that, because if the growth comes way down, again, that means we're going to go into a recession, which is very much a possibility. Looks going towards the future. Again, that doesn't stop the market from pushing up for the most part. But in the meantime, new news will sell off the market. And then once the market normalizes too, it'll start pushing up. So just have to be mindful of that. Again, why a lot of people are hedging with crypto, hedging with stocks, hedging with real estate because of that fact. But nonetheless, SPX, again, going in tomorrow needs to hold that level. If it doesn't, we got a massive flood sale coming in if that is the case. Bitcoin still 137 mark. See how this does. Again, that 32 is really when might start getting concerning if it breaks that. But right now we're still good. You can see buyers are still moving in. It's still wicking. So that's a positive sign. Again, the market could continue to start pushing up and running. Again, these stocks have done very well, but it's when your best stock, Tesla, gets hammered. It does fantastic earnings and then gets hammered and starts selling off. It doesn't help with the Twitter news and Elon. Because a lot of people are worried about what's going to happen with Tesla. Essentially, if Twitter, something happens with Twitter, go ahead and start talking about Tesla. But if something happens with this, that's why they had the massive sell-off. If Tesla or Elon starts selling his shares to buy Twitter, this might continue to flush going into tomorrow. We did break the 200, so this is kind of more I'm watching tomorrow. I'm watching essentially that probably even go that 900 mark, doing a retest of the 900 tomorrow. If it does retag that, bad market sentiment, this thing can continue to sell down. Then your next floor is 818. Then we break that. You're gonna have the psychological numbers of 800, 750, 700, 722 is a critical point for the 20 EMA monthly, which has been a very long time since we tagged that. Again, but we are getting into that cycle. Like I said, after earnings, we're in the second week of that Tesla earnings cycle. So you're going to get selling. This is normally what happens. There's always some kind of catalyst that typically happens after the fact that will cause these things to sell off. Again, you already had your pre-earnings run, which was about, I think, 300 or 400 points. Now you're starting to get that sell-off, kind of resetting everything, waiting for the next quarter. That's kind of how the cycles typically go. Now, again, Google. This is a very interesting one. They barely made expectations, but the growth is extremely hindered. This thing sold off really heavily. It tried to fight, but it just sold off hardcore. If we gap down, this thing can really gap. That's my whole deal here. If we start looking, now you guys start looking at these levels. You start looking at the weekly level. So this candle wick. So this bad boy could possibly even sell down. The 2215 is one mark, and then you got essentially the 2000 mark. So you could get a huge gap on this if we really start selling. And then you got the 2-for-1 split, which is a ways away. But there could be a lot of massive selling in Google here. Growth could be dramatically hit really bad going forward because of the forward guidance. Now, I think all this is kind of blown out of proportion. Stock market normally is, especially when it's, again, new news. And so it will sell off really heavy. And then once everything normalizes, it'll start pushing back up again. So we'll see. Again, things can get really bad still to this point. So I don't consider a flash crash. We've already had 15%. We're starting to get back down to that 15% on the index, but ultimately understand that tech is going to be hit the biggest because of what's going on with the market. That's why we've also seen value rise so fast. But again, big levels tomorrow. Again, this weekly, this is not good for the weekly. This actually looks like this wick right here is essentially telling you that all the sellers are coming in. And so you got some pretty, I think you got some pretty heavy selling, at least down to the 2211. Let me look at where it's at right now. 2211. So we've already broken that. So we've hit that first support on the weekly. So the 2211 support. So you're bouncing off this right now. Going into tomorrow, if this doesn't hold, which the top of the range is a 2253. I mean, you could gap down. If we gap below this 2207 tomorrow, if we wake up here tomorrow, you're going to get pretty much a straight flush down to 1991. Not saying that can all happen in one day. That is a weekly candle. But if we find ourselves below this 2207 tomorrow, there could be a pretty hard flush, especially with people finding out that the growth is just really bad. Coming into tomorrow, people just might start selling. Once volume comes in this tomorrow, earnings and everything are great, but if that forward guidance is bad, this is going to start selling pretty heavy. So we got that tomorrow. We got Google. And then we had now Texas Instruments is the one I really talk about, but chips are again getting the forward guidance is really bad on these things, and so you get this massive gap down. They did well, but again, forward guidance is kind of like, oh well, how well are these really going to do with sanctions and lockdowns and everything else? It's putting more strain on supply, causing it to sell off pretty heavy, especially tech. Tech needs to be normally normalized. And you start talking about any kind of rate raises, especially at the high rate in which is rumored to be going on right now. Again, we'll figure that out next week. But I think ultimately what we're probably dealing with here, just as a regular market sentiment, is that we will continue to sell, in my opinion, all the way until we find a solid base again. I think we're breaking that base. I think we will sell again going into next week, and then we'll determine what the Fed has to say next week. And if the market accepts whatever the Fed says, which ultimately, in my opinion, they can throw whatever rates out there. The market's used to some rate raises, but ultimately, if they remove that bond buying, asset purchasing, that I think could be a catalyst to make us see new levels to the downside. Otherwise, I think we can start heading back up because the earnings they're still doing well. The growth just isn't there, which again could lead into recession. Why we're getting some heavy selling right now, because people are starting to understand that. But again, I think once we get the Fed numbers and stuff like that, I think by that point we'll have a new base. We might break that level this week if we get more bad earnings from Apple and Amazon. Facebook, I'm pretty sure, is going to be bad in general. But anyway, that being said, that could push up, start pushing stuff back up after that meeting, in my opinion, but we'll have to see. Normally around that time, it starts getting dead towards June, July, but we'll into the May period, into June and stuff like that. So we'll have to see. The whole cycle this year has been very different, been very off because of what has been happening with the general market sentiment. So, and the war and coming out of a pandemic. So as soon as we thought we had a grasp on everything went back because of the war. So again, we have what really matters. That's kind of what I'm watching those tomorrow. Facebook is the other big one I'm watching for earnings. Kind of watching to see if it'll retest the 181 tomorrow because it finally broke that support. But I think this one can really start tanking and really selling even more. They lost a lot of revenue on Russia, and that's where a lot of these, any kind of like social media, anything that makes money from essentially ad revenue is going to be hit hard because Russia had a big majority of that, and they're not going to get those back. That revenue is just completely gone. You're not going to be able to make that up unless there's some other way. This is also why I think Zuckerberg made the move he did a couple months back and started focusing mainly on the multiverse stuff, because of this fact that he knew that the whole cycle of ad revenue is kind of starting to die out. Like, they need to find other ways of doing so, especially because we've seen that with Apple locking down, putting a lot of restrictions in their phones. So people like Snap got affected, and also it affected Facebook in that matter. But having its own separate thing like the metaverse and stuff. So big one I'm watching tomorrow. We'll see. And then the other big one I'm watching is Apple on Thursday. In Amazon, if Facebook tanks, I think Apple and again Amazon are really in for it, especially if the whole market in general gaps down tomorrow off of essentially what's been going on with Microsoft and Google. Again, forward guidance is the biggest thing, and again, companies are barely hitting estimates. Again, you're coming out of a pandemic, so the estimates were really low, and so people are hitting like way over because estimates were so low. But now understand that, oh, well, we weren't expecting a war, so now we got the war to fight against. So again, all these expectations and stuff are going to be hard because nobody knows. I think everything will be fine after the fact, but again, the initial everything is going on. So it's kind of the same cycle you see over and over. It's just different events and stuff that happen that cause it to sell, but it all kind of cycles the same way. So nonetheless, we'll see what happens tomorrow, see where we go, and then we'll take it from there. So again, remember to manage risk. Again, this market is extremely volatile, and it's not slowing down anytime soon. So remember to drop a like button if you made it this far. Until next time, I'll see you guys later.